Hello everyone, welcome back. It is December 16th, 2025, as I'm recording this video. So as we are heading towards the holiday season, Christmas, New Year's, first let me wish you all a peaceful, restful, and pleasant holiday season. And I hope that you have some hope, some enthusiasm, some things to be excited about for 2026. I've decided to playfully and, somewhat ironically, although irony sometimes is our way into an exercise and then we can let go of the irony to some extent. So I started to playfully do my list of top 10 books, the top 10 reads, the best reads for me in 2025. And I find it to be an interesting, helpful exercise to reflect on the year's reading, to reflect on why I read, my priorities in reading, genres, topics, authors, and also to be thankful. Some of the books that I will be mentioning, some of the books that made it to this list of top 10, were books that I read with my reading group. My reading group meets online on Zoom every Saturday at noon Eastern time. So we meet, discuss for about 2 hours every week. And together this year, 2025, we have read 12 books together. 12 books. So this is like a lesson. If you're interested in getting back to reading, if you find it difficult to read, to focus, to schedule your reading, to read more systematically, I think joining a book club, a reading group, not necessarily my own reading group, because your reading interests might not be the same. You might be interested in reading maybe purely just only fiction, only contemporary fiction, or only philosophy. But regardless, joining some kind of group, some kind of study group, reading group, book club, I think it would help immensely. And it would give you that bare minimum of, okay, I'm discussing, reading, and this reflecting on at least this number of books per year. For the reading group itself, as you're going through it, it's going to feel slow. It's going to feel like we are taking our time. We're not reading as much. But that's a day-to-day experience. At the end of the year, you realize, wow, we read a lot. Actually, we've read a lot. It's been a rich year when it comes to reading, if I just focus on my reading group. There are other rules that I've applied to making this list. I've decided to, for example, not include any works by Freud himself, Sigmund Freud. I read with the group Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, and I've also decided not to include Jane Austen in the list. Same applies to Foucault, Michel Foucault. I've read a couple of books by him this year, and the Foucault Reader, not including those, because it's difficult to explain. But if I include, for example, in my top 10 list, let's say Madness and Civilization, or the first volume of the History of Sexuality, or Civilization and its Discontents, or Beyond the Pleasure Principle, or Sense and Sensibility, it doesn't make sense. It's really, to me, it feels like those books right now, for me, they live outside of this exercise. And their inclusion in this list is going to make the absurdity of this exercise come to the foreground. So there's something ridiculous about this exercise of creating your top 10 list and suddenly including Sense and Sensibility. It's going to make it more absurd. It's going to make it more ridiculous. I may be wrong in describing this, my reasoning, but this is how it feels like to me right now. So I decided not to include those, to include works that I have maybe I've read more superficially relative to those, or maybe they are books that I have been able to distance myself from more successfully, to really get out of them and look at them. But again, even that might be wrong. That might be an approximation of something else that is actually the reason. But anyways, the list is still serious for me. It's still a serious list. They are good books. They are really, all of them are, in a way, they are bests. In some way, they contributed something very unique to my reading life in this year. So let's begin with 2 books about Freud. These are number 10 and 9. So as it is customary, I'm beginning from the bottom of the list. So number 10 is Becoming Freud by Adam Phillips. Really fun read, really enjoyable, mesmerizing, engaging, and the form of the text is compatible with its content. This is something that Catherine Malibu writes in her preface to Power of Gentleness by Dufourmantelle. That book is not on the list, by the way. But Malibu says that there are some books that what the thing that they are writing about, the thing that the book is about, how the book moves, how the book is written is actually consistent. So the book of the Power of Gentleness is written in a gentle tone. It's written gently. It's a gentle style of writing. So Adam Phillips's book about Freud is Freudian in its style. Okay, number 9, another book on Freud by Jonathan Lear. This is I would say, a more in a scholarly way, more rigorous book, comprehensive, suitable for people who want to think clearly and carefully about Freud. Maybe they have some skepticism about Freud, although Adam Phillips also addresses the issue of skepticism, but in a different way. Jonathan Lear is very sober-minded, more objective. So in some ways, Adam Phillips's book is more appropriate to the topic, but Jonathan Lear's book is more appropriate for people outside of the discipline of psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis is a discipline, I think. So Jonathan Lear, that's number 9. Number 8 is a very interesting book. And while we are on the topic of psychoanalysis, it's a very interesting book by a musician, Chili Gonzales. It's a stage name, artistic name. The book is called Enya, a treatise on unguilty pleasures. It's related to psychoanalysis in a way that I think it's a lot of fun. He begins by talking about lullabies and how the author's own mother, lacked the kind of soothing voice that a mother would have if the mother is going to sing lullabies to the kid. So that becomes a way to enjoy his enjoyment of Enya's music. And this part, unguilty pleasures, this phrase, is a challenge to the categories of low and high art. And that it's a defense of the fact that if you enjoy something, that enjoyment, that pleasure, is a truth. There's truth to that, and that truth is undeniable. And it's better to examine, to stay with that truth, to be faithful to it, to be attentive to it, than to judge it and say that's just a guilty pleasure. Because we are dismissive of our own guilty pleasures, if we have that category. It's a challenge. Gonzales is challenging that category. I think the way that, at least how I read the book. Number 7, again, a work of serious and popular philosophy, The Entanglement by Alva Noë. Subtitle of the book is How Art and Philosophy Make Us What We Are. We read this book with my reading group, chapter by chapter, slowly, and I got a lot out of it. Alva Noë is one of those philosophers who really influenced me. As you know, as some of you, I did my PhD in cognitive experimental psychology, and I became increasingly critical of the overreach of how experimental psychology, cognitive psychology, it kind of reaches beyond what it can do, promises beyond what it can do in understanding our social reality and what it means to be a person, our personhood, our selfhood. And even language, even our understanding of language that is provided by cognitive science is, in a sense, impoverished because it doesn't regard language as a social practice, as a historically shaped, something that is historical, social. So anyways, it's like cognitivism is, the bias is to look for things in terms of mental model, in terms of neurological systems. And so the first book that it really shook me by Alva Noë was Varieties of Presence. Really great book. I read that a couple of times when I was in Leiden, a postdoctoral fellow at Leiden University. Then after that, the book I read was Strange Tools. Also amazing book. So this, the Entanglement is quite similar, I think, in its scope to Strange Tools, but it's more concerned with the mind. Strange Tools was more concerned with art itself, artistic practices, creative practices. But there's a lot of overlap in the concern. So if you have read and enjoyed the Strange Tools, I think the Entanglement is a good follow-up. Okay, that's number 7 on my list. Now we get to the category of fiction, the really fun category. Fiction is, if you have seen my other lists from previous years, fiction is always above nonfiction, as God has intended. So number 6 is El Túnel, The Tunnel by Ernesto Sabato. I reviewed it. I saw it as more like a psychological thriller, confessional, similar to the category of stories by Edgar Allan Poe. There are a couple of stories in this collection. This collection is The Fall of the House of Usher and other stories. So 2 of the other stories in this collection are The Black Cat and The Telltale Heart. The Telltale Heart. So those 2, The Telltale Heart and Black Cat, those are similar to El Túnel. They are these confessional stories from the perspective of someone who has committed a crime and is now going over it. So you are, the first thing is like, are we dealing with an unreliable narrator? How much of what he's sharing with us is the truth? How much of what he's considering as relevant is actually relevant, and what is irrelevant but he might consider relevant, and so on. El Túnel, amazing. If you watch my review of The Tunnel, you will notice that I have included discussion of writing itself, art, the writing, artistic decisions. There's something about Sabato's task as a writer that resonates with the story of the protagonists, the narrator of the story. Okay, number 5. This is a classic, so I considered also removing it, similar to Sense and Sensibility. I considered taking it out of the list. It's Candide, or Optimism by Voltaire. The reason why I'm including it in the list, as opposed to like honoring it so much to take it out of the list, is maybe because I read it superficially. I read it just for fun, and it is a lot of fun. It's a very dark. It's dark humor. And what else can I say about it? It's a critique of optimism. It's a critique of, Professor Pangloss, who becomes a very memorable character. In several conversations since I've read the book, I'm find myself making references to Pangloss, this academic. He's optimist in a different way than Candide is. Candide is genuinely an optimistic person, but Pangloss is manipulative optimistic. He performs optimism. But despite its horrific aspects and darkness, it's engaging, humorous, entertaining, and I think it is still worth reading, because it's the mindset that he's applying. Voltaire, the mindset that is applying in that book is something that we can continue to apply to the optimisms of our own time, including technological optimism, maybe. Okay, let's move on. So Candide was number 5. Number 4 is a book by Ali Smith that really blew me away this year, How to Be Both. It's a dual literary work. It has 2 aspects, and the author in the beginning says that he can read either of those 2 parts first and then move on to the next. And in fact, in some versions of the published work, the sequence is different. So there's contemporary, historical, and then historical contemporary, because the first part that you read might enframe the next part. So those 2 are switched to allow readers to change the framing. It's a combination of, and it's a very experimental novel in its technique, in its method and form. It's a work of historical fiction concerned with the life and work of Francesco del Cosa, and the other aspect is a contemporary work of fiction concerned with the life of a teenage, maybe transgender person, teenager. And these 2, I mean, if you read some of the reviews of the book, it just makes you think that it's all about the lived experience of a transgender person and their identity. But that's such a, for me, it's just a small part of the novel. Yes, identity is important, but there are other, development is another part. Social role, friendship is a big part. The relationship between child and parent is a huge part of the novel. The parent's relationship with other characters, also important. So the dynamic environment within which the person is developing, finding himself, herself, themselves, is a theme. And that the movements between perspectives is also important. It's really How to Be Both. It reminds me of something that my psychoanalyst friend, one of my psychoanalyst friends, told me about the task of life being at the same time finding your singular life, finding all the things, combination of all the things that is unique about your path, about your journey, your mission, your projects, and on the other hand, finding something universal in all of that. And those 2 things are not separate. It's not an either or. It's finding the other one by going through the first. So you can be focused on the singularity and the courage that it takes to have your singular life, and then realizing that actually that resonates with something that transcends you, something that is very universal. And the reference to this other character, Francesco, the painter, Renaissance painter, in the novel, Ali Smith's novel, it brings out that theme of universality, I think. Even though you just see 2, but that's a technique in mathematics. If something works for number 1, and then if you prove that n plus 1, if that statement is true for n, and then for n plus 1, then the rest is true. This came up in one of our discussions in a book club, in a reading group, but I'm not remembering who shared it with me. Anyway, so How to Be Both is number 4. Yes, so everything all the works from 4, 3, 2, 1, these, needless to say, from here on onwards, we are looking at works that really blew my mind, not just enjoyable, interesting read. I was really shaken by all of these. Number 3 is The Street of Crocodiles by Bruno Schulz, collection of short stories, interconnected, observations about family, characters surrounding family in the neighborhood, the culture and life of the neighborhood in which the author is growing up. And there's an element of surrealism that gets to truth in a way that is even more raw than realistic descriptions. So the surrealism is not a flight of imagination necessarily, although it is a flight, but it's a flight to a deeper core of what is actual experience than a way. It's a more realistic, what the end result of reading, when we read Bruno Schulz's surrealistic descriptions, is a deeper, more resonant kind of realism that reminds us of the childhood imagination, how we imagine as children the things around us, how we see, how we perceive, and how our imagination are such a complement to our perception. Always enriching, always like shaping what we're actually looking at, what we're observing. Okay, so Street of Crocodiles, it really stood out. Number 2, Ursula K. Le Guin, The Left Hand of Darkness. One of the many things that is so amazing about this novel is the mythological pieces. So Le Guin is giving us access to a world, and in this world there are myths, the people, inhabitants of that world, that planet. They're different from us in many ways, but one of the ways in which they are different is that their myths are different. So she provides us with myths in different chapters, and then you can see how the actual story is resonating with the myth. So in many of the novels, great novels that we read, for example, East of Eden, the myth is operating in the background, the myth of Cain and Abel, for example, or the Book of Job. Maybe we can see that as operating in the background of the picture of Dorian Gray. But we have access to those myths because they are our myths. They're part of our history, our culture. We may not even consciously thinking about them, but they shape the way we grasp other stories sometimes more directly. But in Le Guin's world, she provides us with the myths, because we don't have those myths. So they can't just stay in the background. We cannot just infer them from the story. So I found that really, really fascinating, and a reason to think, engage more deeply with the work and to reread it. It's also a novel that shifts across perspectives, the human perspective and the other type of human. So the two kind of species, we shift across their perspective. Okay, Left Hand of Darkness was number 2, and number 1 is a novel that I discovered thanks to Debra Romanick Baldwin and her book, The Inwardness of Things. And she's somebody that I've been in touch, exchanging emails, and hopefully I will share with you an interview that I've conducted with her soon. But anyways, her book is really important on its own, but it opened up to me this novel by Joseph Conrad. that is really we can read it as a commentary on crime and punishment. It's Under Western Eyes. Under Western Eyes. This is a novel with multiple narrative frames. So there's official narrator, the frame narrator, so to speak, and then there's the main protagonist, Razumov, and the other characters that he's dealing with. The way they make sense of the narrative, they make sense of the events, the way they respond to the events, the way Conrad brings our attention and brings in the political aspect of their world, the autocratic aspect of the environment, the world that they're living in, and how that shapes their social interactions, how that shapes the way they make sense of events. Like the event of being arrested by the police. It's a different experience within an autocratic regime than in a more liberal democratic regime, where you know you have rights. The reason why this is a commentary, a skeptical commentary to Dostoevsky, despite Dostoevsky's work also being a masterpiece, of course. But there are certain things that there are certain issues on which Conrad parts ways with Dostoevsky, like the issue of confession, that if you just confess, you redeem yourself. It's like you can take back your mistakes or the impact of your mistakes. You can get a clean slate. For Conrad, you can't go back. You can't undo a deed, a crime. And the other thing that Conrad casts a doubtful eye on is this experience that is a mystical, aesthetic experience that people might have specifically within autocratic contexts, the context of what Romanick Baldwin calls the politics of no recourse. There's nothing to do in your actual context, so you might take flight and escape to the world of ideas, and that world might engulf you to a point where you might have this like experience of what you might consider as mystical, and that mystical, poetic, aesthetic experience might then justify for us a crime. So Conrad gives us good reasons to be skeptical of that. But then there's a lot of other things. There's a sympathy with Razumov, the main character, and there's also the details of moving in and out of the social milieu, and finally, one last thing. It's the experience of someone who really doesn't want to have anything to do with this political drama, but is dragged into it. Someone who thinks very carefully, coldly, reasonably, a very reasonable person. Razumov is related to the word reason. And he's isolated with that reason, that detachment, that cold detachment that he has as his mode, style of being, is something that isolates him. And towards the end, you see a kind of a move against that. Okay, that's all for now. I might have a longer discussion of Under Western Eyes later. If you like a good commentary on Conrad, all of his major works, and including Under Western Eyes, get that book by Debra, Romanick, Baldwin, The Inwardness of Things. I hope you have a great 2026, both in terms of reading, your reading life, and otherwise. If you have comments, if you have favorite reads that you'd like to share with us, please share those in the comments. I always read your comments. Otherwise, take care of yourselves, and until next time.